So if you think you know a lot about Romance languages, Latin languages, you better watch this video, because here we're going to talk about the Sardinian language. The Sardinian language is a little known language spoken by actually many people, over 500,000 to 1 million people in the island of Sardinia in Italy, in the Mediterranean, one of the largest Mediterranean islands. But the Sardinian language, which has been evolving from Latin since antiquity, since the Romans Latinized the island in a few centuries before Christ, one of the first areas outside the Italian peninsula to be Latinized. The Latin language evolved there uniquely, and even though it's been under the influence of Italian and Catalan and Spanish and other outside languages, Sardinian has evolved a few features that are uniquely archaic and that make Sardinian a good candidate to being perhaps the most conservative of all Romance languages, even more so than standard Italian, more so than Romanian. It's it contains features that are unique to it. There are certain words that have been lost, words and grammatical features, and especially phonetic features of Latin that have been lost in all other Romance languages and have only been preserved in Sardinian. So stick around in this video, watch it to the end. Don't forget that I also teach languages online. If you want to learn Latin languages online with me, contact me on my email. You're gonna see it on screen, and under the video there's more information on how to contact me to learn Latin languages, Germanic languages, Slavic languages, and classical Latin and Greek also with me online. And there's also my dictionary, my online thematic, intuitive, multi-language dictionary that where you can compare the vocabulary of dozens of languages, European and Asian languages, and even generate your own online dictionary that you want. You can ask me to provide a specific dictionary for you, or even generate your own version of the dictionary online. So get in touch with me. Take a look at that information under the video. Here we see a map of the modern Romance languages in Europe. Okay, there are more Romance languages than most people imagine. I won't talk about this map specifically. There's a lot of details to talk about there. In the future on this channel, there will be detailed videos on the evolution of Latin languages and specific, not only the big ones, but also the small ones, the little known, the almost extinct local regional languages that have been relegated to the category of a dialect for the past few centuries, but there are actually linguistically independent systems, independent communication systems that are not variations of another language. They are true languages. The first one here on my English version of my channel that you're watching right now will be Sardinian. Right now we're gonna delve into the Sardinian language. You can see here the evolutionary tree of the Romance languages. Take a good look at that map, because we will be looking at that map for quite some time during many videos, or many of future videos. I'll be using those maps and charts and diagrams to explain the evolution of not only Latin but also Semitic, Germanic, Slavic languages, many other Indo-Aryan languages, Bantu languages. So subscribe to the channel, because this channel will contain information about every language in every major language group, and most individual languages that a human being can describe, that we have information about, will be provided on this channel. You can see that Sardinian, as you can see on the map, stands on its own branch as the earliest offshoot of Latin, the first language to start diverting from classical Latin, from the oldest forms of Latin, because Sardinia was Latinized before most of the rest of Europe, before most of what is now France, Spain, Portugal, Romania, and even the rest of the Italian peninsula. They were more slowly Latinized over the course of a few centuries. Sardinia itself was already Latinized probably 100 years before Christ. So the Latin language started evolving there before it started evolving in the Vulgar Latin, the colloquial language, the colloquial Latin that was taken to Sardinia first in the first few centuries was different from the colloquial language that the Romans took in the following centuries to Spain, to Romania, to southern Italy, to northern Italy, to France. So that makes Sardinian unique, as I've already said, in among the Romance languages. Now let's take a look at the Sardinian language on the island of Sardinia today. You can see the brown and beige colors on that map of Sardinia represent the modern varieties of Sardinian. Those dialects can be described almost as independent languages themselves. Okay, there's Campidanese that prevails in southern and central Sardinia in dark brown, including in the capital of Sardinia, Cagliari. In northern Sardinia, there are two main varieties. One which is called Logudorese, and one which is very close to Logudorese, but it stands apart quite a lot, which is Nuorese. I'll be focusing on this video. I will be focusing on Nuorese, on the Nuorese dialect. Most examples will be given in Nuorese dialect because this is considered the most conservative of all Sardinian varieties. It has a lot of features that even within Sardinian are more conservative than the other dialects, because maybe the other areas have been affected by outside Italian and Spanish and Catalan influence over time. And the Nuorese region was a little bit more isolated and preserved, a little bit more of a more grassroots Sardinian than we see elsewhere. In northern Sardinia, there's also a region that speaks Corsican. Corsican is a language that was taken to the northern island of Corsa, mostly from Italy, but it was taken to Corsa much later in history. Even though Corsa was actually Romanized pretty early, but Corsa continued to receive massive amount of Italian immigration over the centuries, which made the Corsican language very similar to the mainstream peninsular Italian languages. It's quite close to Standard Italian and other dialects that are present in central Italy. So Corsican is not actually much of a relative to Sardinian. It's a different story altogether. And there is also in blue on the map, right on the east in the Alghero, there's a small region that still preserves Catalan. Okay, the Catalans dominated Sardinia for many centuries during medieval times until modern times, when Catalonia itself was absorbed by the kingdom of Aragon, and Aragon and Catalonia were then absorbed by the kingdom of Castilla, which then formed Spain, and then the influence of Catalan was replaced by the influence of Spanish. So Spanish had a lot of influence on Sardinian, but the language to have affected Sardinian the most during its evolution was not Italian or let alone Spanish. It was actually Catalan. So there's a lot of Catalan words that have been inserted, exported into Sardinian, especially during medieval times and early modern times. Here's a few websites and books that I've used as a source for this video. There aren't many sources on Sardinian. It's hard to find even online. You find some stuff in Italian, some stuff in English, not that much. There's this website, L'Imbassata su Sardinia. I have this dictionary, Fuedario Sardino Campidoneso Italiano, Grammatica del Sardo Nuorese, which is described il più conservativo dei parlari neolatini, the most conservative of all Neo-Latin speeches, Neo-Latin languages. I have a Sardo Italiano vocabulary, which is pretty large. It's a pretty big vocabulary, a very large dictionary, very, very complete, and it's been a major source here when it comes to vocabulary research. When I try to research what the vocabulary of Sardinian was like, that came in handy quite well. Sardinian phonetically, it doesn't stand apart. I mean, in terms of phonemes itself, it doesn't stand apart all that much from other Latin languages. It does sound a little bit like a mixture of Spanish with Italian, but the evolution, one of the main features that it has is the paragogic vowel, a vowel that repeats the last vowel if the words end in a consonant. So if a word ends in a consonant, after that consonant, most Sardinian speakers, it varies from dialect to dialect, but most Sardinian speakers add a repetition, a copy of the previous vowel onto the end of the word. So a word like prus, which means more, is actually pronounced prusu, prusu. Susardus is actually pronounced susardusu. Saslimbas is sarlimbasa. There's also a phenomenon that changes the S to R in Central dialects in the end of a word. So sar can be sar, sas can be sar. Okay, the definite article in Sardinian is su for masculine and sa for feminine. That's one thing that makes Sardinian stand apart from other Latin languages that typically have la, il, el, lo, los, le, derived from the Old Latin ile, ila. In Sardinian, the definite article is derived from ipsus, ipsa, which meant the same in Latin. So the the word flower is masculine in Sardinian, just like in Italian, unlike all other Latin languages. But the flowers is sofrorese, sofrorese. You spell it sofrores. But sofrorese repeats. There's an echo, a bit of an echo vowel at the end of the word. And the most stunning feature in terms of evolution of Sardinian is that Sardinian retained most of the pronunciation of the velar consonants before any vowel in Latin. So the ke and ki sounds in Latin became che and chi in Italian, and became se and si in French, Spanish, Catalan, and Portuguese. Se si, che chi in Italian and Romanian. But in Sardinian, most dialects, especially Nuorese, retained something of the ke-ki pronunciation. So a word like kelo, kailo, in Latin was sky. In colloquial Latin, that was pronounced kelo. We still have kelo in Sardinian. Whereas in Italian, we have cielo. And in Spanish, we have cielo. And in Romanian, we have cerul. So a word like 100, which is cento in Italian, still is pronounced cento in Sardinian. So Sardinian is the only Latin language to have preserved the pronunciation of the initial K sound, even before the front vowels E and E. In Latin, cento became cento very early on in Italy. Probably in colloquial Latin, in vulgar Latin, already by the year 200, 300 after Christ, we had that change taking place in all over the Latin-speaking area, but not in Sardinia. Sardinia is still here, cento. Let's take a look at a few audio samples of Sardinian that I took from the internet to hear the language. You're gonna see. Pay attention to the paragogic vowels repeated after the words, and to the accent that is today very much affected by Italian. You can see that those people are speakers of Italian. They're impinging on Sardinian, a very Italian rhythm of speaking, but the Sardinian language stands clearly apart from Italian and from most of the varieties of Romance languages spoken on the Italian peninsula.
Benvenuti a questo nuovo programma de Telesasari. Este un programma de lingua sarda e bisogna narrare prima di tutto it non che essere questo programma, che prima de bornare it da essere. Questo programma non pretende de imparare completamente il sardo per due motivi. Prima di tutto che non rendiamo conto che vi accherre avere troppo tempo per imparare tutto il sardo, e poi che non rendiamo conto che vada a avere troppa varietà del sardo per porne d'accordo tutto quanto. Ecco poi deo bosappa fai dare sempre a sozzanesa chi è sull'imbazzo che mi hanno imparato babbo meu e mamma mia. Bosappa ragola è scritta invece bosappa fai che biere gusa chi ho si mutti di sa lingua sarda comune, chi non è nuda de inventato, deo non so è in no che può scontare macchinese, e questa lingua è una lingua che è naschia commente una spezia de compromesso sull'ultimo morgai tra tutto già variante sarda.
Saluto a tutti, io mi narro Riccardo e oggi appo a fare in sardo. Tanto, appo fare questo video metacurso che no, sinceramente a come non penso di narrare ma poto galu fai dare un pacu a sopra dessa limba e a sopra de su dialetto che sto fai dando a como. A come sto questionando in un dialetto più o manco finiscoleso che l'ho poi imparato da essere finiscoleso, so, ovviamente. È un pacu nugoreso, finza sa, che su nugoreso fiti su primo limbazzo che avevo cercato, che avevo provato ad imparare. Ite poto narrare de pruso. Su sardu est esa limba che mi piace de pruso, de totus a limba sa romanza sa. Est una limba meta speciale pro mene. Est una limba che tiene uno sonno meta misterioso. Gai. Tanto invio salutos a totus os sardos che mi conoscono e a totus os atteros sardos. Voi setsi su uno popolo meta ONU, meta accoglizzante, non mi indamento pruso, ma est totu. Grazie a meta a totus sos che mi hanno imparato paraulas a meta totu. Tanto adiosu.
Okay, that was interesting, right? Very unique language. We're gonna take a look here now at how the language works and how it differs. First of all, how it differs from other Romance languages. What makes Sardinian unique in the Romance, in the Latin family? So yes, the first thing is the evolution of K and G, which became Che and Je in most Latin languages, and then evolved further to Se, Ze. For example, cento versus cento. We have cibo versus cibo. Cibo is food in Italian. In Sardinian, you still say cibo. The definite article, as I've already mentioned, is su and sa in Sardinian, instead of il and la or le and la, which is typical of Romance. In Sardinian, they still use the word domo for the house. Like Latin, domus was a house. In all other Latin languages, that word was replaced by casa or mansione, which in case of casa meant like a hut. It was a poor person's house. Instead of a domus, was a casa, was a hut. That became the standard word for house, and domus itself was lost. Magno. Manu is big in Sardinian. Comes directly from Latin magno, which was lost in all other languages, all other Latin languages, and we have grande, typically in other languages, except in Romanian where there's mare. Ruere. So in Sardinian we have, instead of the verb cadere, the verb to fall, which is cadere in most Latin languages, except for French, which has tomber. In Sardinian we don't have cadere, we have ruere. To fall is ruere. And the verb dicere in Latin, to say, which gives us dire in Italian, dicer, decir in Spanish, is also absent from Sardinian, as they use narrere, to say, which is the verb narrare from Latin, to narrate, but mysteriously changed its conjugation from the are conjugation to the ere conjugation. And also notice that in Sardinian there is no second conjugation. The ere verbs are always stressed in the stem, never in the ending. Like what happens in Latin, in Italian, where there are verbs like narrere and narrere. In Sardinian, the verbs ending in ere, always the ere is unstressed. Always the ending is always unstressed. In most languages, you have a domani, a word derived from morning, derived from the word for morning to describe tomorrow. So in Italian, there's domani. In Spanish, there's mañana. In French, there's demain. In Portuguese, there's amanhã. In Romanian, there's bine, means tomorrow. In Sardinian, they maintain the old Latin word for tomorrow, which is crasa. when they have the vowel echo at the end. But casa is meda is a lot instead of molto, comes from multo in Latin. They use gena for door. Most Latin languages use the word porta, puerta, puerta. In Sardinia, they still use Genoa, which comes from the old Janua, which is an old word for door in Italian, in Latin. The verb ducere in Latin, which means to take, to lead, evolved into gigere in Sardinian, and only Sardinian preserved this verb alone, other than Romanian. Romanian also has duce alone. The other languages preserve that verb only with prefixes. The other languages typically have portare or levare or prendere for that meaning. There's also ferrere. Sardinian is the only Latin language to have preserved the verb ferrere, from Latin ferre. Other languages also have prendere, portare, levare, piccare. There's also decere. Decere from Latin decet, decere, which means to be decent. That's where the word decent comes from. To be suitable, to be decent. They still have decet. And in the verb to know, they have sapere, like most Latin languages, but they have like Romanian. Only Romanian and Sardinian have maintained the old Latin word, the most commonly used word in Latin for to know, which was scire in Latin, iscire. So have scire and sapere. Sapere maybe was a later Italian influence, but sapere meant to taste, to try on something, to try the taste of something in Italian, in Latin. The conjugation of iscire is isco, iscis, iscit. You see that Sardinian preserves the third person T marking at the end, iscit. Iscimus, iscisis, iscinter. Não importa plus o su iscire, importa plus su facere. Knowing doesn't matter. What matters is to actually do something. That's a Sardinian saying. And the verb facere, also pronounced just like in classical Latin. We have ponere, the verb to put, but there is also mentere or mentere, like Italian, mettere, to put. From the old mittere in Latin, which meant to send. The verb to speak is very interesting. It's faidare. It's related to the Iberian word falar in Portuguese or hablar in Spanish. The word for word is paraula, just like in Catalan, but it can also be efedo, sufedo. Balcone or ventana are the words for window. So balcone is the older word in Sardinian. Ventana was a later Spanish export. It's not even Catalan. This is an actual Spanish word, because in Catalan this word is finestra, like Italian. So they don't have finestra. They have balcone and ventana. They also alternate between rio and frumene. The word for river, which is in Italian is only fiume, in Spanish is only rio. To take can be leare, from the verb levare, or pigare, related to pegar in Portuguese, to take. To eat, mandicare. They preserve the old form of this verb, which we still see a bit in Romanian when we conjugate this verb in the present, menanca. In Italian, the middle of the word, in Italian, in French, and Romanian, the middle of this verb has sort of merged into one syllable. So we have mangiare, manger, manjar in Catalan. But in Sardinian, you still see mandicare, which comes from Latin manducare, it meant to chew something, meant to chew food. To want, it can be querere or bolere. Querere or bolere. Querere or bolere means that they have both querere, which is like the Iberian languages, the word querer in Spanish, and voler, which is the volere that we see in Italian. They have both conjugations. Ndequere meda. I want more of it. Meda means more. And nequerio, ne is the adverbial pronoun of Sardinian. Sardinian does have the adverbial pronoun just like Italian ne and the French of it. I want more of it. Nequerio meda. Also a unique word is occano. This year comes from oc anno in Italian, in Latin, meaning in this year. Também and ancora both mean still. The também in Spanish or in Portuguese means also, but in Sardinian it means still. Conca is a word for head, even though they also have cabita and cabeça for head. A puzzone is a bird. To kill is bucire or occhire. Both come from, they're related to Italian uccidere, from Latin occidere. Olho or ojo or ocru, the eye. Aurica or oricha, the ear. Trabalho, to work. Sounds almost exactly like in Portuguese. Peogo is a louse, which is in Italian pidocchio. Bisognare is to bisognare, to need something. The verb to understand is comprendere. Straco means tired. What's interesting in Sardinian as well is that it preserved the Latin words that ended in us, which in the other Latin languages have evolved into merely u. The s was reinterpreted as a plural form. In the singular, the s was removed from these words. In Sardinian, these words like tempus and corpus are still pronounced tempusu and corpusu. So tempusu, so corpusu. The time and the body. So Sardinian preserves these old neuter nouns, which were in the third declension in Latin. Some of them are preserved with their endings, which is completely unique, completely archaic, very, very archaic feature of Sardinian. As I said, the definite article in Sardinian is also unique to this language. You have suyoko, the game, sosjokoso, the games, sakosa, the thing, saskosasa, or sarkosasa, the things. The word for same is matesi, similar to Spanish mismo, or matesh in Catalan, or medesimo in Italian. In Italian has medesimo and stesso. In Sardinian there's only matesi. So matesi yoko, the same name. Samatesi cosa, the same thing. The demonstratives. Custo custa means this one here, where I am. Cusu means this one near you. The second person demonstrative, indicating where the person spoken to is. And kudo kuda means that one over there, far from both of us. Sasdias de saquida. Quida is the word for week, by the way, in Sardinian. Okay, I don't know where that came from. I giorni della settimana here in Sardo and in Italian, showing a standard Latin. They are similar to Italian except for essentially Friday. Friday is kenapura. Kenapura comes from cena, which is dinner. In Italian, cena, and pura, which means clean, pure dinner. There are Sardinians who say that this is from the old Jewish community. They used to make a pure dinner before the Sabbath, before the Saturday. So Friday was a cleansing process for them. That's why Friday is called pure dinner, pure supper. The months of the year can be quite surprising as well. There's Benarjo or Genarjo, Frearjo, that's okay. Marzo, Aprile, Maio. But June is Lampadasa. And July is Tiulas or Arjolas. Where that came from, I don't know. Exactly why, I don't know. August is Augusto. September is Capudani. Strange, because Capudani means the head or the beginning of the year. September. Santuaini or Ledamini is October. Santade or Onisanti is November. Okay? Completely different. I bet most of you never knew that there was a Latin language with such different names for the months of the year. Meseidas or Nadale is December. So that's, like I said at the beginning of the video, you thought you knew something about the Latin languages, but you didn't. Well, until you know Sardinian, you really don't know everything. Okay, and there's a lot to know about the other languages as well. I'll be making videos about Piedmontese, Lombard, Sicilian, Romanian, Aromanian, Megleno-Romanian, Dalmatian, Catalan, of course, Galician. The season of the year, verano, estiu or estiadale, is summer. So verano is spring. Okay, in Italian, primavera, they call it verano in Sardo, which is the word for summer, right? In Spanish. And estiu is the Catalan word for summer. Atonjo is autumn. Ibero, Izero, or Iero is winter. Here's the colors in Sardinian. Bianco or arbo. Arbo is the old Latin albus, which is only elsewhere preserved in Romanian. The Romanian word for white is albo. Most Western European languages have branco, blanco, which comes from a Germanic loanword, related to black in English. It meant like an empty color. Nighedo or niedo is black. Ruyo, rubio is red. Grogo is yellow. Biaito or brau is blue. Azulo or quelo is also light blue. Tanal or púrpura is purple. Verde or vidre is green. Aranjo, which is orange. Tabaquino, muscu is brown. Pertigatsu, which is actually gray. And rosa, which is pink. Numbers in Sardinian: uno, una, duos, duas, treza, batoro, quimbe, seze, sete, otto, nove, dece, undici, doici, treici, batordici, bindici, seici, decesete, deceotto, decenove, vinti, trinta, baranta, quimbanta, and the word for 100, cento. Now into the language itself, the grammar. Norese Sardinian. Norese, this is the Norese dialect of Sardinian. Dego or eo, deo, which is me. Probably the junction of the preposition de with the old Latin ego. Tue is you. Isso, issa is he and she. Nós and boys, we and you, plural. Issos, issas is they. Consider the object forms mene and tene, very unique. Okay, remind me of Romanian. There's mine and tine in Romanian, right? Only Romanian is similar in that respect. There's this N that pops up there. I don't know where they took this N from, but it's there. It's in Romanian and it's in Sardinian as well. There's an unstressed object form, me, ti. Some other forms like kinmekus with me, kinmekus or kunmekus, depending on the dialect. Kinmekus is Nuorese. The Campidanese form would be kunmekus. Kunmekus comigo, which is the comigo of Spanish, with me. It's the mekus in Latin was already with me. Then Sardinian and the Iberian languages have repeated the preposition with again in the beginning. So kinmekus. Kunmekus, kumecum, tecum, quintecus, with me, with you. And the possessive pronoun meu, mea, tuo, tua, suos, nostro, brosto. Brosto is vostro, vostro in Italian. The Sardinian verb essere, Deo soy, I am. Tu esses, you are. Isso est. Nós semos, vós sesis, isso sum. The imperfect, which is era in Italian or in Spanish, appears to be derived from the old Latin perfect, right? The F form, which is fuit. So I don't know why the perfect migrated to the imperfect form. Sardinian doesn't have the era form. So there's fipo, I was. It's like io ero in Italian. Tu e fisi, tu eri. Isso fit, lui era. Fimus, physis, fini. Subjunctive, sia, very similar to Italian, and the imperfect subjunctive, essere. There's also a few other forms. A gerund, a past participle, estistau, or estada. The future of verbs in Sardinian is also unique to the language. The future of verbs is made of the verb to have before the verb. I have to do something. Apo a facere. We're gonna see that. The verb aere, which is the verb avere, the verb to have. The verb apo, deo apo, I have. Tu eas, isso at. There's still the T in the third person. Nós amos, vós ases, isos an. And there's an imperfect aio, aia, which is I had, I used to have. A subjunctive apa, aere, an imperfect subjunctive. This is important because, as I said, the verb to have is also the auxiliary for the future. The verb circare, to look for, which is cercare in Latin, related to search in English. Circo, circasa, circata, circamusa, circaesa, circana. Circavo, which is cercavo in Italian. The past perfect is always made with the auxiliary to have plus the past participle. So he looked for in the perfect past is at circau, at circado in other dialects. And here the verb finire, which unlike Italian, unlike Catalan, unlike Romanian, unlike French, they don't have that extension that they put in the ire verbs. Like in Italian, finire, finisco, finisci, finisce. That happens in many Latin languages, but in Sardinian, they don't add it, just like what happens in Spanish and Portuguese. So Sardinian is almost like an Iberian language in a few respects, right? That's why I said it's impossible to classify Sardinian very well. It's a language that defies classification. So fino, finici, finit, finimus, finies, finin. There's no finisco. There's no isco. In imperfect, finio, finivo, and so on. A few other verbs of interest to understand the language. The verb to go is andare, just like Italian, but there's no mixture between the andare and the vadere. There's no V form. In Italian, you say andare, ma io vado, tu vai, lui va, loro vanno. In Sardinian, it's always andare. Ando, andase, andate, andamos, andasis, andan. Andare, there's no other stem. It's a regular verb. Podere is a verb can, to be able, which is irregular in most languages, already comes from an irregular formation in Latin. Poto, podes, podet, podimos, podides, podem. The imperfect is podio or podia. Podiam, podiamos, podias is podian. Venere, which is to come. Venire. So the venere changed conjugation from the ire conjugation to the ere conjugation. Venere. Benjo. Benjo, benis, benit, benimus, benisis, benin. Tenere also is the verb from tenere in Latin, the verb to hold. Tenjo, tenges, tenget, tenimos, tenien, tenen. And ponere, we saw that earlier, ponere, the verb to put. Ponjo, pones, ponet, ponimos, poniese, ponene. Adjectival comparison is made with pruso. Pruso forte, and the preposition is e, just like similar to Latin ex. Even though in this case I think it's derived from the de. The de that lost its d in the beginning, I'm not so sure. And then you put the object of the pronoun, which is in this case tene, like Romanian ține. Prus forte, pruso forte tene. Deu seu, pruso forte e tene. I'm stronger than you. So, wow, that I believe you now have an idea of Sardinian. It's very difficult to get an idea of this language because there's a big scarcity of resources, and most resources are quite confusing. I spent several weeks leafing through strange, obscure works to summarize the information that you see on this video. So any contribution is welcome. If you want to contribute to my PayPal or to my Patreon or other forms of contribution, you can find the links under the video. And you can contact me to learn languages directly with me and learn linguistics as well. I'm graduated linguist. I have a degree in linguistics. I've been studying linguistics for most of my life, and on this channel you're going to see some of my work. But if you contact me, I can teach you directly either the science of linguistics itself, historical linguistics, for example, how Indo-European evolved into the various modern Indo-European languages, and any specific language, as well, any specific modern languages like Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, Swedish. I speak all of those languages very well. I speak Russian, I speak Polish, and I have also moderate knowledge of the old classical languages like ancient Greek and Latin. So contact me if you want to learn these languages as well. I also know my dictionary. Please visit my dictionary, my multilingual dictionary, and the other links that are given under the video. Okay, so see you next video. Here on this channel, you're going to see almost every language in the world.